Greetings gamers, FiOth here, and in this video, my very first video of a new series called Honest AF Reviews, I will be taking an in-depth view at the Callisto Protocol, the brainchild of Glenn Schofield and to a certain extent Steve Papoutsis and the rest of the gang from Visceral. These guys formed a new studio called Striking Distance in order to produce a game according to their original vision, a survival horror AAA experience that would scare us to death and impress us with the technology behind it. How well did they do on each of those regards? First and foremost, the format of this vid, so I don't get anyone anxious. There will be zero spoilers in here. All you're gonna see is gonna be the trailer that you're watching now and gameplay from the very beginning of the game without subtitles. The source was 4K, but the video ended up rendering at 1080p, or it would be very hard to watch on YouTube for many connections. And according to if you are using HDR on your display or not using HDR on your display, the colors might or might not be a bit off. Any kind of frame drop or stutter you see has to do with the game's lack of optimization, and it's not the fault of your machine or your connection. The game is very poorly optimized for PC at the moment, but I'm gonna get in depth with that in a second. Without further ado, let's take an in-depth look at the Callisto Protocol. I will begin this review with the positive and the obvious. The Callisto Protocol looks amazing. It wouldn't be a far stretch if we said that this is the best looking game we have to date. Every single new technology is integrated, like ray trace reflections, ray trace shadows. You can tinker with pretty much every aspect of the visuals, and as I said, I recorded the footage here on 4K, was getting around 90 FPS on the game's own benchmark, with everything on ultra and ray traced mostly off. It hogs a lot of resources and it really wasn't a good payoff for me. I tried playing it with ray traced to a certain level and it works pretty much okay, but you lose a lot of performance in order to have specific visual candy aspects enabled. So I am guessing, without having any solid numbers in my hands, that most of the budget for this game went into the visuals. It pays off because it looks amazing, and I would like to draw your attention to the small detail here at the start of the game that will be present and prevalent throughout the entire experience. I've never ever in my life seen sweat in games done so well. If this game ended up being the next big thing, other developers would take a cue from it when it comes to how they should be rendering sweat on characters, because this is realistic as all hell, looks amazing, and makes for a good bit of immersion, because let's face it, if you were in the shoes of these guys, you'd be sweating your sack off. So the game starts with a bit of mystery building. It wants to create a scenario where you will be wondering what's coming next, what's happening, why are we here, why did we end up in this predicament? And for a good bit of its duration, I would say it kind of succeeds. The story in the Callisto Protocol gives you hints at the beginning and then takes an awkward turn at some point, introducing elements that were obviously put there so Schofield would approach his original creative vision that he explored with Dead Space. As I said, there will be zero spoilers here, but what's been done here has been done before, and sadly has been done better by the director's own creation in the past. So there is a saddening aspect about the Callisto Protocol. It feels like they're trying to bring back their lost child, but at every corner something is lesser than what they achieved in the past. I don't want to be too damning of the game, but let's say that by the end of it, you won't be blown away by what is happening here. So we have the graphics on a very positive note. The story and script are serviceable but nothing memorable, and then I would like to touch upon the sound for a bit, because it is by far the least flawed aspect of the game. And when I say the least flawed, I might as well be saying it's pretty much perfect. Like, the sound design of the Callisto Protocol is amazing. Everything is designed with great attention to detail. Everything you step on sounds different, everything you hit sounds different, everything you hear in the environment sounds different. It is a very intricate soundscape, and it really saddens me that most of the stuff that you'll be hearing in order to feel stressed and menaced pretty much comes from background audio. That doesn't mean that you're pursued or that there are actual enemies there. Voice acting is also great, and the facial expressions accompanying it are on point. Sadly, the lip sync is a damn mess. I really can't wrap my head around how they could be so careful about the facial expressions and so not careful about the lips of the characters talking. It is uncanny, if you know what I mean. So, the game starts kinda slow. As you can see here, I'm mostly shimming through openings in walls and climbing on boxes, and for the duration of this review, you won't see much action at all because the start is very, very slow. It took yours truly 8.5 hours to finish the game on his first run on the max difficulty setting. 15% of that duration has Jacob, our character here, crawling in air vents. And in these air vents, you are never in any danger. That breaks the immersion a great deal, because in horror masterpieces of the past, like for example Project 03 or FiOth Frame 3 as it was known in different regions, even when you were crawling in an air vent or a similar construct, you were always assaulted, you were always in danger of being attacked. In a horror game, safe spaces ruin the immersion and the fear factor. Sadly, a big chunk of the Callisto Protocol is traditional means of traversal from times past. And during those traversal moments, you're in no danger whatsoever, you're just chilling. The game utterly falls flat on its face when it comes to the fear factor. It might be deemed an atmospheric creation, but it is not scaring. And I know that fear is very subjective. Every person feels differently about what's scary and what's not. But the Callisto Protocol simply does not bring enough legitimate scares to the table. It's jump scares here and there. Every time you want to flip a switch or pull a lever, you will be thinking, well, I'm probably gonna get jumped here, and you usually get jumped, but rarely does it have any lasting effect. It's pretty much of no conscience. So how does the actual gameplay fare? This is where striking distance took its biggest gambit, and sadly, I hate to say this, but it didn't pay off. The problem with this game lies in the fact that it throws all its money at its combat system, and its combat system is a melee focused, close quarters, and very, very closely followed by the camera slugfest. So what you'll be doing is perform 3 to 4 hit combos on enemies and do this little dance, the ebb and flow of dodging attacks with very, 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 very forgiving input, and then counter-attacking until your combo is done. To be more precise about the whole ordeal, you will usually want to take a hit first, dodge it, and then proceed to counter-attack, completing a melee sequence followed up by a firearm shot if you have the ammo to spare and the firearm equipped, of course. There is not a big amount of weapons. You only have the one melee weapon instead of, you know, a plethora that you could choose from. You initially start with a lead pipe and then you transition to a baton and a few firearms, some of which make no sense. There is a traditional shotgun and a one-handed shotgun that pretty much deal the same amount of damage. One has a higher magazine capacity and one has a smaller magazine capacity. And if you unlock their special secondary attacks, you might see some mileage when it comes to what makes them different. But the game has no New Game Plus. You have the one chance to upgrade something, and it's strict with resources, so you will never be maxed out. You have to purchase about like 20% of the entire amount of upgrades there, and trust me, I looked pretty much everywhere. So it is a melee focused game with only one melee weapon, one basic combo. You might see different animations according to what you're hitting, but the combo is the same, and then allows you to take a shot in order to either dismember the enemy or stop a transformation process, and then you go back to dodging, because if you try to re-attack and re-engage, you always get punished by the AI getting attacked in return. Since 80% of the game is fights, this gets tiring really fast. To top it all off, there is no running from these encounters. Enemies will either hunt you down on foot or get into an air vent themselves and then magically reappear in front of you. There is a programming error in the Callisto Protocol when it comes to traversal. When you're climbing up a ladder or interacting with other context-sensitive pieces of the environment, you are not invulnerable. You are actually part of the environment you're interacting with, at least up to the point of this review. After 2 patches, trying to climb a ladder while you're being attacked by enemies means that you are part of the ladder in the eyes of the code. So if the enemies attack the base of the ladder, the actual metal work, you will be taking damage and probably dying whilst climbing and wondering what the hell is happening. It is frustrating beyond all belief that they didn't pay attention to this, since the game's pretty much telling you every single meatball that you're meeting here you have to defeat. You can rarely avoid anything, so you better get accustomed to smashing their heads in with that baton, because you'll be doing that a lot. Enemy variety is not that great, but it's not the worst I've seen. It's not like Resident Evil 7, which I adore by the way, but it was very lacking in terms of enemies, and it made sense because of how the world was built. Here you have a bit more variety, but these enemies are not as nuanced as the Necromorphs. The Necromorphs had a lot of characters, there was a lot of intricacy on how they were designed, and of course you had to dismember them and make a tactical approach when fighting them. There's nothing like that here. You don't have a stasis module, you just have the grip, that it is a grab and throw kind of mechanic. It is very junky, especially when it comes to collision with the environment. You might pull an enemy in, and then if the enemy touches a pixel of something, they drop from your grip, your telekinetic grip, and because the button used to throw stuff is also used to shoot, you will be ending up shooting at nothing in many an occasion, because the enemy got stuck somewhere, and instead of committing to the gravitational pull, they just drop flat on the floor, and you just lost energy and ammo over nothing. It is very unforgiving if you don't understand the combat system, and I don't have an issue with that, because not every game should be Kirby, but the junk doesn't really allow for much precision. When you're fighting something up close, you better wish you don't get attacked by anything else, because you are magnetized towards the nearest enemy. So if an exploder, for example, is crawling towards you and you want to pull out a firearm to shoot it at a distance and explode it while it's still safe, good luck with that, because it's not gonna happen. If you try to bring about sights, the enemy in front of you will keep hammering you. You will not be able to fight back at either a distance or close quarters, and you'll have to live with the fact that the exploder will probably reach you and blast your face. It's oversights like this that made me really curious about what they were thinking, and what I perceive as a priority here, as I said earlier, were the graphics and hiring of the actors. Fukuhara and Dahabon here do a great job of representing their characters, but they are both kinda expensive actors, and hiring them instead of going for a more traditional approach, I think was a great mistake. Jacob is not the most likable of characters. It might have to do with the fact that he's a really macho character on his depiction. Isaac in Dead Space used to be a much more sympathetic guy who was dropped in that hell and had a technical background. You wouldn't see his face until the end of the game. You just hear an everyday man scream in agony, get scared, express himself only through the voice acting that was very minimalistic, and you cared. You felt like he was dealt a really bad hand. Jacob here, on the other hand, seems extremely proficient with firearms for some reason, although he's a cargo freight pilot. You never get deep background knowledge of what he's about. You never see him form any meaningful connections. The game tries to take a jab at making you feel something about what's going on, but rarely succeeds. So, what can be said about the Callisto Protocol? I think it's a huge wasted opportunity. They really tried to do something here. I know Schofield is really committed to his craft. He's really honest about what he's trying to bring to the table. But sadly, the priorities placed were very, very, very wrong. And I'm saddened to say that the small duration of the game, the focus on fighting and melee with a problematic melee system, and the non-existent exploration here don't really give a reason why you should play this. I mean, it's a 100% linear experience with no new game plus, and when it comes to optimization, PlayStation 5 runs fine. Xbox Series X just got some ray tracing features because it started with none, and the Series X is a pretty powerful machine. And on PC, the caching of shaders and assets is handled so poorly that you will get huge stutters the first time around. Things have improved with the 2 patches that they released, but when I started playing this to review it for a Greek outlet, it was hell to play through. Every time I would be hearing a stinger about something happening, I would just see a freeze frame, and then everything would happen in an instant to catch up to the sound, and I would have lost the entire thing. So if you're gonna give me eye candy in a game like this and have it barely function when it comes to what I should be watching and when, you've done something very wrong. And considering that the very first patch that really helped the game work in a better way came up one day after the release, they really shot themselves in the foot. Like, if you watch some reviews out there and see the reviews on Steam, it is a very mixed bag. Like, it drew a lot of bad attention to itself, the way it handled things. I wouldn't recommend you get the Callisto Protocol at full price. And for me, pricing is not about duration, it's about the quality of the experience. About 40 to 50% of playing this was sheer frustration because of how badly designed certain things are. I wouldn't have an issue with it if it was like a solid 7 out of 10 game, but it sadly isn't. It's going from point A to point B again and again and again. The way storytelling is handled is very poor. This is a very, very simple example of the character failing to get to his destination because a bridge breaks, or he falls from somewhere, or he ends up taking fire and has to jump in a river or a drain pipe, and then he has to recover his ground, get to the next point of failure, and then recover ground again. And everything happens in very one-tone environments filled with enemies. Fighting more than one of those things is a nightmare, and by the 80% duration mark, the game just gives up on any kind of creativity, goes 100% bankrupt on ideas, and just makes you fight through hordes of enemies. Something you'll be very, very tired of doing at this point. As you can see, we're like 20 minutes into the vid and I've still fought 0 enemies or encountered any kind of danger. Here I'm just still running the tutorial, fighting in a sequence of scripted events. And let me remind you, if a game is 8.5 hours long on its highest difficulty setting whilst quote-unquote exploring everything, a 20-minute tutorial is a lot of wasted time. So, this is my first honest as fuck review. Yes, I said it, and I hope you liked it. I will be bringing more of these, and I would really like some feedback on how this was handled and done. Maybe you have some ideas on how to make these things better. Tell me you want to see reviews of older games or even some movies. I've done some of these. You can watch them and give me some feedback if you want. And I hope I gave you some useful insights so you can make an informed decision about whether you want to buy this or not. If you want to buy this, I would suggest the PlayStation 5. I have a pretty beastly machine here, and going from 90 frames to 30 for no apparent reason is not the best experience you can get. In a horror game, if something stutters, you're instantly taken out of the experience, which means that all the stress, all the tension is gone. So sub, like and share, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified about uploads and streams, and if you really want to help me out, guys, consider Patreon to get a membership on the channel. It really helps a lot in these trying times. Until next time, be well, stay frosty, and always strive for perfection, gamers. Cheers!